So, welcome to Surrender Live. I'm here with my buddy Shaun, who's a huge movie fan. Shaun is big into movies, big into pinball, big into arcades, and we both have a love for the theater. We've talked about having these conversations for a while now. Our first double feature is going to be two films in the vampire western genre. We have 1987's Near Dark by Catherine Bigelow and 1998's Vampires by John Carpenter, also called John Carpenter's Vampires. This conversation started up because Shaun said that he revisited John Carpenter's Vampires recently, and I had to watch an iconic beginning scene. And then after seeing it, I wanted to revisit it and see if the whole movie held up. And then from there, I recommended Shaun revisit Near Dark. So, but let's start with them chronologically first. So we'll start with Near Dark first, and then after that, we'll talk about that, and then we'll go into Vampires from there. How's that sound for you, Shaun?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Sounds good. So 1987's Near Dark. This is a film that we were super young when this movie came out. And oh, I should say too, before we get started, these films, it's going to be spoilers for both of these films, but not only spoilers for Near Dark and Vampires, also spoilers for the other big vampire films that came out the same year. So 1987, spoilers for The Lost Boys by Joel Schumacher, and then 1998's spoilers for Blade as well. So there will be spoilers for all four films here. But revisiting Near Dark, I remember this film when I was a kid. I remember it being iconic. You and I do a vampire role playing game, and Near Dark
Yes.
is a big inspiration for that. I hadn't revisited since I was a kid, though. I did remember those iconic scenes. So just like that beginning scene that we'll talk about for John
Yeah.
Carpenter's Vampires, I remember the bar scene for Near Dark. Um, this movie I thought was so good to revisit. I thought it was fantastic. I was surprised to see that the actress that played Vasquez in Aliens was the mother type figure,
Yes.
in the family. That was really cool to me to see three actors from Aliens, and then you even had to the Aliens marquee in the background. In that, I'm not sure if you saw that when they were in the city. So the movie theater marquee said Aliens, which is really cool.
Yeah, I wonder what the connection is.
Well,
Was somebody
it's Catherine
Oh,
Bigelow. She was married to James Cameron.
there it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think that she got married after this movie, and but I
Mm.
in the scene where Bill Paxton's character is doing his feeding scene for Severin, the guy that flips him off, apparently that is James Cameron, the guy that flips him off before he picks up the two girls. So
Oh,
uh,
I didn't
yeah,
notice that. Okay.
well, apparently he just visited set. I don't think you can really see him because it was dark.
Ah.
But I thought Near Dark. I think I even told you right after I watched it. I thought it was probably one of the best vampire movies I've ever seen. As you know, as a kid, I thought it was great, but as an adult, I think it holds up extremely well. It has. I was really surprised to see that it was actually Catherine Bigelow's first movie.
Well,
Or
that's
her.
what I was thinking. Like, did she do this movie when she was a teenager? Because she's not that old, and to have a movie from the '80s that she directed,
She had to have
uh,
been in her 20s. She had to have been, at least in her 20s, right? Because James
yeah,
Cameron got started late in his career because I think he was like a truck driver and he started like in his 40s making movies or something like that. So
right.
I mean, unless he was dating like a really young girl at that time, I don't think. But no, that she did. I think she did a fantastic job with it. The movie's beautifully shot. So
Yes.
the word is on the internet, if it's to be believed, is that she wanted to make a western, a modern western,
Yep.
and and then they wanted to use horror to make that happen. So
Yep.
that was what she did, and I do think that she did such a great job. Both these films are the same type of premise, right? They're vampire horror western movies or horror western movies, and both of them wanted to make westerns from the outset, and then they made a
Yep.
vampire movie. But this one, I think that she did a really good job with it. She covered a lot of ground. It's a really good story of the white hat cowboy, in the band of the outlaws, right? And
Yep.
I thought overall, I really enjoyed this film. I think that Lance Hendrickson and Bill Paxton are the absolute standouts to me. Lance
100%.
Hendrickson, especially, for me. you know, I love the Lord of the Rings movies, right? And
Yep.
whenever I watch the Lord of the Rings movies, one of the things that's so iconic for that movie is the guy as Viggo Mortensen's portrayal of Aragorn. And the reason
Mhm.
why is because his costume feels so lived in to me. He always has that stringy, greasy hair, and he's kind of always
Yes.
looks dirty. And
Yeah.
Legolas, and don't get me wrong, like Legolas and Gimli and all those guys, they look great, but they don't look as lived in for the costume. And apparently, Viggo Mortensen used to go around New Zealand and just eat at diners with his sword perched up against the bar and stuff, and all that stuff. So he used to do that stuff. Well, apparently that's exactly what Lance Hendrickson did during this shoot. Apparently he basically made a whole backstory for his character, and then he would basically drive around or he'd hang out in bars and things like that as Jesse Hooker, and
I
he'd
can see
stay in
that.
character. And I think that his costume has all these little, you know, pieces to it, and it just absolutely looks like there's a backstory there. I would love a novel or a comic book, or I should probably check to see if there is one, to see if
Yeah.
there's something for this character, because it just seems like there's so much there. You know, even
I
with
yeah.
sorry, go
No,
ahead.
I was saying, yeah, I'm curious about his face, right? So, Lance Henriksen has a very, weathered face
Craggy.
naturally,
It's
right?
a craggy face. It's
It is, but I feel like it was heightened for this film,
yeah,
and I'm wondering, especially his what is it, his right cheek, right? It looks like it was completely, like, shivved in the
yeah.
face or something.
I noticed that
Uh,
too. I thought that was
yeah,
real though. I
it
thought
looks so
maybe
real. Yeah, is it a prosthetic or is it his real face? And
I
if it is his real face, do they cover that up for his other movies that he's done?
I don't know. See, my wife and I are huge X-Files fans, and and he was in Millennium, which was also done by Chris Carter for the X-Files, and he was actually in an X-Files episode that we watched recently for a bunch of our Halloween X-File episodes that we were watching, and um, I didn't notice that when I saw his face in that, so I assumed that maybe it was the weight, because he actually looked like he was a little bit thinner than he was when he played
Yeah,
Bishop,
yep.
and that I'm not sure what year was Aliens. So Near Dark was '87. So assuming maybe
Aliens is '86, I think.
yeah, so it's probably less than a year later because you notice Bill Paxton's hair's grown out for Severin, right?
Yep.
So it had to have been right after. I don't know if it was a weight thing or what, but he just killed it for me. He crushed it, and I think that Bill Paxton crushed it as well because Bill Paxton, I have always maintained, such a great actor. He always plays like a second fiddle
Yeah.
character. He did have later on in his life, he had an HBO series or a Showtime series, something I think it was called Big Love, and that I heard he was really good in that. And then he did a great Hatfield McCoy series, mini series with across from I believe it was Kevin Costner. He was great in too, but he typically was never a guy that got top billing for something, and he's on the box or on the movie
Yeah.
poster for a lot of stuff for this. So,
I think
um,
he's got Twister
oh,
in
Twister,
terms of,
yeah,
like, top billing, but, like,
yeah,
that's his, like, go-to. You think of him, you think of Twister, but you're right. I feel like he absolutely just has one of those magnetic personalities that shines through in all of his characters, and he definitely steals the show in this, right? I mean, every single scene. You talk about the bar scene that you remembered from when you were a kid.
hmm
He is just living it up. You can tell he's having the time of his life doing
yeah,
that scene, and but it's weird because there's this dichotomy, right, with him where it's like you can't take your eyes off him. You're so entertained by him, but he's also really scary in Near Dark, very intimidating, um, very unpredictable. And I think that really came across in his portrayal of the character.
absolutely. And there's even some history. Like they talk about, remember that fire we started in Chicago, right? So
Right.
if they're referring to the Great Chicago Fire, that was the late 1800s. So
Yeah.
is it possible that Severin also got turned in the Civil War right after the Civil War, by Jesse? So I think that there's a lot of history there, and it's a very they did. You know how I feel about psychopath movies, right? So
Hmm.
a psychopath family, that archetype in film, like the Firefly family from the Rob Zombies films and things like that, you have to tread a fine line of you need to make them likable and
Hmm.
enjoyable, and you want to see the next thing that they're going to do. And I think
Yep.
that they did a really good job with that for this because Bill Paxton's character was realistic. He wasn't like the guy that was just randomly out killing people, right? He was kind of a wild loose cannon, but he was
Yep.
still always typically operating in the best interest of the family. And I think that was huge. And I think that, and you felt that power dynamic too. You always felt like Jesse was always the boss, but they didn't need to feel the need to tread the ground of, I'm going to buck him for, authority and things
No,
like that. It was
there
always
wasn't like a
everybody knew their
Starscream
place.
situation,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly, exactly. And there was another movie too recently where somebody talked about it was Firefly. It was I think it was Honest Trailers that thing where they said that in Firefly the Jane Mal relationship was like a Starscream and Megatron. It was pretty funny. But anyway, I felt like he was great. You know who I felt was really good. I want to get your take on this. The kid, I thought he was good. How you? So
Yes.
you are a huge you hate
Yeah.
a bad kid actor can ruin a film for you.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely. Bad kid actor is my Achilles heel. It's my pet peeve, and I feel like they can absolutely ruin things that are amazing. And I thought the kid in this was great. I mean, I thought he was fine. I'll say that. I thought he was fine. In the fact that he wasn't annoying. His motivations were pure, right? And he didn't do any of those annoying kid tropes. And I think that's because he was an old man, right, in a young kid's body, and they mention that.
mhm.
Um, do I think he did as good a job as oh God, what's her name in Interview with a Vampire? Um,
Oh, now I'm
Mary
blanking
Jane,
out. Yeah, the girl from Spider-Man.
right?
Kirsten
Uh,
Kirsten Dunst.
Kirsten
Yes.
Dunst, yes.
Yes.
So I thought she did an amazing job, right, with that whole like I'm stuck in a child's body. I just want to be a woman. This kid in this did a good job too, but he had a couple of tells, right? That like when he's smoking at the table when they're playing cards. Um, I'm not a smoker, but I can definitely pick up on when someone is not used to holding a cigarette and operating with a cigarette.
Right, right.
And, thank God this kid wasn't an experienced smoker. But so I think that's the only time that kind of like that veil was lifted, and it kind of shined through that he was a kid just pretending to be an old person. But other than that, great portrayal. He kind of latched on to the main character's sister in the movie, which I thought was an interesting choice because if he is older and he wants to be treated like an adult, why is he going after this other little kid? Did he want this other little girl to kind of be along with him for this ride and be stuck at this young age so that he has someone to relate to? I wish they would have flushed out his motives there a little bit more.
Right. I think the reason why that he did that was I he mentions that he turned the girl May and then she turned him. So he mentioned that like it was a slight to him. I
Yeah.
think that he realized that if he wants to have companionship, they would have had to turn that little girl. And I
Mm,
think that when he saw her, and now I think that they could have expanded on that big time. But from what it was just the right mix between the family, including the kid being likable, but also being scary, right? Because
mhm,
the movie showed acceptance, but it didn't try to undo any of the weirdness. Like, Severin gives him the spur, but the movie doesn't do anything to absolve Severin, in that moment. It doesn't try to make you think like, oh, maybe Severin is a good guy. No, he's still really bad.
yeah.
And I think that was really interesting. But I have some trivia about the kid that I thought that when I read this, I thought it was great. So that kid, I was super familiar to me. He looked kind of like the kid from Pete and Pete, but I knew he wasn't because the movie was too young.
Oh
The movie
yeah.
was too old for that. But I remember him from a movie back when I used to watch when I was a kid called Teen Witch,
Hmm.
which has this hilariously bad rap scene. You need to watch it sometime. But
Oh God.
um,
Okay.
but it's because of his vocal pattern. Like he has like a kind of a slight lisp, and the way that
Mm.
he speaks was very just I just it was embedded in my memory. But I looked him up. He actually wrote a movie that you made me watch a few years ago. He wrote The Final Girls.
No way.
Yes. And uh, and
What?
and here's the other a big piece of trivia for this one. His father was the actor Jason Miller, who played Father Karras in The Exorcist. That's pretty big, right? In real life, that's his
Yeah.
father. But his half brother, that actor Jason Miller's other son, Jason Patrick, who was in The Lost Boys. So this guy's two sons were in these two vampire movies in the same year. It's pretty interesting to me.
That is crazy. He's at the center of this horror world, right? And I guess that's maybe why he wrote the Final Girls, because he's just been a part of it.
Yeah, it
Him
may
and his
be.
family.
I mean, or
Interesting trivia.
I'm pretty sure that there's no Teen Witch fans on the convention circuit, so
I haven't seen that, so no judgment. No.
it's really bad. It's very 80s. Speaking
Oh,
of it being
good.
very 80s, I guess that, like, I would say my biggest gripe with this movie is the ending, because the ending is so 80s to me that I actually
Oh my
didn't
God.
remember it. I didn't remember the ending. So when the ending
Yeah.
hit, I was like, "Oh my god, like I can't believe they wrote it out that way." Now, with the blood transfusion thing, I
Yep.
thought maybe, okay, so I thought if that's the case, maybe it's because he hasn't killed somebody yet and he hasn't fed, and maybe that's why it worked on him. But then we see that
Then
it
they.
happens. You
Hmm.
can do it for the other girl. She has killed people. So I guess if that was the case, maybe he could have reached out to them like, "Hey, I can heal you. I can fix you." And then maybe when that happens, then maybe when they react negatively because they don't want to give up who they are, they could have really hammered that point home. So I was just
Right.
super shocked with the ending. It's probably my only big blemish on the film, other than the rotoscoped fire on the kid's face as he burst into
Oh,
flames. But
yeah. I made a
but
note
it's
of
the
that.
80s. It's the
It
80s.
is. It gets a
I have a
pass.
yeah, I have a
Yeah.
lot of leeway for stuff like that.
Well, the
Um,
poor kid's he's running at the camera, right? So it's
right,
his face. They couldn't even put a stuntman in there. And it's like, how do you have the actor run at the camera with his face and set a kid on fire safely?
right.
So I get it. I get it. They had to do it. There's no other way around that. But you're right with the transfusion thing. Logistically, okay, it's a movie, right? So we kind of have to accept some things, right? But my mind is like, if vampirism is like an infection, right, like a virus, and you get bit and you slowly turn into a vampire, which in this movie isn't very slow at all.
Right.
Um, how how does a transfusion overcome that, right? Because if you're putting blood in, that blood should be starting to get infected as well. I mean, you'd almost have to drain someone completely, and maybe they did. Maybe they just didn't show that, right? That they drained him completely and then put in new blood. But I I don't know.
I see. I never got the impression that they were going for a virus. I still get the impression it was still mystical in nature. I think my issue for it is that it was just too tidy, right?
Mm.
I would almost have wanted that 80s trope of, um, maybe everything seems okay, and then your final stinger, maybe it's not,
Right, the
something
eyes light
like
up.
that. Yeah, something like that. Or,
Hmm.
right. Like, but I do feel like I get why they did it. um, I think the other thing you talked about, the kid running towards the camera with the fire, that did remind me though too, in that the end of the movie where he is, the young Colton
Hmm.
is going towards the camera, and you see that Jesse and the girl are in the station wagon. The way they filmed it, they film it from him from the front, and then they film the station wagon from the front. And I almost thought at first watching it that they were going towards him, and
Yeah.
they're meaning to convey that he was going away from him. And it was interesting to me because I was like, that was an interesting choice, for that scene. And I guess maybe they did that so you can see them coming towards and you can see their faces a little bit more. But I think we've seen in films like, Halloween by John Carpenter. Like, remember when the station wagon's driving away, like they yell at the station wagon and he stops, and then,
Hmm.
like, and then he moves on. Well, that when that station wagon stops, it's a scary moment. So that station wagon had body language. That was an emotive station wagon, and I think that you still could have done that with them driving away rather than having the shot of them coming towards you. Um,
Right. Because I was getting the impression that he was gonna run them over for leaving the family,
right, that's what I
right?
thought too.
Yeah,
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 and
and then it
also
just explodes.
And then Vasquez too, or I'd say Vasquez, but the character, oh, Diamondback was her name
Mm.
in this. The other thing too is there is that scene where she tells Colton to run, and I didn't get that at first. I actually had to rewatch that little clip because I was like, "Okay, does she care? But does she not care?" And I couldn't tell if she was messing with him or she genuinely was just giving him a chance to get away. I couldn't tell if she was giving him a chance to get away to chase him, make it more fun, or if she was really just giving him a chance to get away.
That's what
Um,
I got, because she tells him to run, and then she looks over at Henriksen, right? And
right.
kinda gives him that look like, "Okay," you know? hunt
Yeah.
down your prey.
That might be me just me being a dummy, when I'm watching it, but and I guess we should talk about the main guy, right? So,
Yeah.
I when I watched this, I was like, "Who is this guy? He looks so
It's
familiar."
Scott Bakula Jr.
Well, more, I guess, poignant. He was did you watch Heroes, the TV show Heroes?
No, I think I saw,
Oh.
like, 1 episode
Well, he
and
was he was the senator character. He was Peter's older brother in Heroes, and
ah,
so I was just when I watched it, I was like, "Who is this guy? Why wasn't he in more stuff?" Because he looks like he has a good '80s face, right?
yeah,
It looked like you would have expected him to be in more stuff, and maybe he was, but it was just interesting though too. I felt he was really good in it. He was surprisingly really good in it. Um, I felt like
a lot
the
of charisma.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
he's instantly likable. Like, even though he's kinda coming on strong to May in the beginning, right?
right.
He's not that strong. He's not, like, douchey strong where he's basically trying to rape her and he has his hands all over her. It's strong, but it's not that bad. So he's still likable. He tries to show her the horse, and he has a lot of chemistry with her, which kind of the whole movie is built around. So I think the casting choice is excellent.
Yeah, yeah, me too. And I think that she did a pretty good job too. I feel like they were very touchy feely with each other as far as actors go, like more so than actors typically are,
Yep.
in movies. And I think that might be because Catherine Bigelow, I do feel that she does a really good job with that in her movies. I think that she does a really good job as a director especially as a female director, capturing like this different side of macho males in her
Mm.
movies, like Point Break, and she did Zero Dark 30, and
Oh, right.
what was the
Art
other?
Locker.
Hurt Locker. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that she has a really good job of showing a different side of males. Showing, I guess, male on male interaction differently in a lot of the
Mhm.
movies and other ones. Like you really felt it in Point Break. The relationship between the two main leads in that, and
Mhm.
then for this too, I do feel like that was a good directing choice. Of They didn't ever say much between the two characters, but you could tell that I should say about the relationship, but you could tell that May really did care for Colton, and Colton really cared for May. And I think that it was a lot of good show don't tell for those scenes, and
Mhm.
and um, you didn't have to have like that. I think a lot of other directors would have done the whole, Jesse, I love him. You can't kill him.
Yeah.
There was none of
Y
that, right? It was just
yeah.
very. It didn't need to be said because she showed it. I think that was good, and yeah, overall, in general, for all that stuff, I think that the movie does a really good job as being a quote unquote modern western of showing, not telling, and having these set pieces with the open road, and you see all these different areas and scenes and things like that, and it really feels like they're out there on location, and which
Yeah.
was fantastic, because you get
It
that look in the desert,
You
um,
do. It's a very specific look, and you mentioned the cinematography at the beginning there, and I have to agree with you on that 100%. It feels like an early Michael Mann type of movie, like Thief, right? There's a lot of like backlit characters, sunsets. You have cities that are very wet at night, right? And there's a lot of reflections there. But then you have those like iconic Western silhouettes with the hero standing in the middle of the street or in the middle of the field, or when you're watching him run across that field in the beginning when he's burning up, you have a
mhm.
lot of really far back shots, like the camera's way far away from the events, and you see a lot of that in those spaghetti westerns too. So I thought that she absolutely captured the look and the feel of a western.
Absolutely, and I think they did a great job with the vehicles too. I know it sounds weird to say, but that crappy truck he has at the beginning, and
Yes.
you hear the door and all that, and there was someone went out and they bought a crappy truck for that, and a lot of the vehicles were like that. I thought that was such a good touch. Everything in the movie just felt very lived in and worn and just dirty and out, like it's
Hmm.
just something that's out and run down out there, which was great. Um, but any thoughts from you, things that you wanted to bring up with that movie?
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the music and the soundtrack.
Yeah,
Um, it's so
Tangerine Dream, Tangerine
yes,
Dream by Boys from
right.
Legend.
Yes. So it's like iconic 80s synth, And it just works, right? Like you hear the term Western, and you don't think like Tangerine Dream, but for some reason, it all just goes so well. I mean, specifically at night, the night scenes. I don't know if you noticed, but they picked up the tempo for a lot of those scenes, so
Hmm.
it kind of creates this like, I don't know, excitement running around, the energy that I guess some of these characters get when night falls, and they're kind of more energized and they're out on the prowl. So I made a note of that, the soundtrack, and we talked a lot about how the connection with Cameron and Aliens. I got a huge Terminator vibe
Yeah, me
from
too.
a lot. Yes. So there's a couple of things. So like the number one thing that really stood out to me with the Terminator feel was the semi truck running over Paxton. Um, I thought that is my number one favorite scene in the movie when
And
he crawls up.
his
His
face
face.
during all that
Yes.
too. Yeah,
Yeah,
very
all
very
practical,
Cameron, very
right?
Cameron.
Yeah. And like half of his face is caved in. I don't know how they did that. The angle is just perfect with him coming up on the hood of that semi truck. So I made a note of that, and then the guy in the bar, the first guy that gets punched in the bar
Yeah.
by our hero, that poor man is the same biker guy who gets his clothes and his boots
Oh
taken
my,
in
yeah.
Terminator 2.
I was thinking that might be the case because he looks so familiar.
Yeah,
Um, oh my god, that's so funny.
he's not allowed to set foot in a bar
By the
ever
way,
again.
in that bar scene, side note for that,
Yeah.
I liked when they start killing people in the bar that people aren't screaming. They're all scared in the silence. That was
Yes.
super cool to me because a lot of movies they would have people screaming and things like that,
"Ah!" Freaking out.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
You could,
they don't do that. Like, the one kid with the pool cue thing, he is frozen in place. Even the bartender himself, normally, any other movie, the bartender would've said, like, "Screw you," and grabbed the gun and shot someone right away, but nope, he's frozen, he's having trouble loading the shotgun, and, yeah, you're right, it was very different. I thought it was a standout moment.
absolutely, yeah, and I know I agree completely too with the semi scene. That whole Severance scene, I thought that was it was great. It was scary. It was a good callback. They did set it up earlier in the movie too, where the guy shows him how to drive the truck too, which is great. I thought
Yep.
that was all really good too. And at my first thought too, I was like, maybe they could have spelled this out a little bit more. But I feel like I'm wrong when I say that though too, because that's my initial reaction. Because a lot of movies spoon feed it to you. You didn't need someone to spoon feed it to you. They already showed it earlier. You know that's what he's doing now. And
Mhm.
I thought that was a really good scene.
Yeah, I mean, d does a semi explode when it jackknifes?
Yeah,
Maybe not,
it,
but we're already
it's
here.
it's the '80s. Maybe they're just
It's
built that way. You know?
yeah, that's right, the gas tanks are right near the surface in the back, and they explode.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share with you my favorite quote from the movie,
What's
and
that?
so after the hotel scene where the main character's father shows up, right?
Yeah.
And they almost get killed, but the door opens and the sun comes in, and they get the heck out of there, and they're driving away, and the father says this line, straight faced, right? He says, "Normal people don't spit out bullets when you shoot them. No, sir."
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I feel like that's the quote. That's the quote of the movie right there. I don't know who the actor was that played the father. Have you seen him in anything
He
else?
wasn't familiar to me now.
No,
Um,
his face looks familiar. I don't know, but yeah, loved it, loved it. Oh, that was another thing too. I wish that they expanded a little bit on Colt's home life prior to all this, because we don't get introduced to the father and the sister until he's basically kidnapped, and they go out looking for him. So I would have liked to see, like a little bit of like the family unit and the type of life that they have together. Maybe just one scene, and I felt like that would have maybe like justified the father's hunt for the son a little bit more, and you would have cared a little bit about his role in the story a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I do think that the father is good. The little girl is pretty good too. I think that the beginning when we first see Colton, he's very forlorn. Like he's almost like Luke at the beginning of the first Star Wars movie, where
Mm,
he wants to get out of there, right? And
hmm.
he tells his buddies as much, right, until he meets May. And I actually really like that scene too. That first scene with May when they're talking about she's talked about the stars. The light from the star will take 1 billion years to get down from there, and she says that she'll still be
Yeah.
there when the light of the star gets down there. You can tell that May's forlorn too. So again, it's like a lot of like show don't tell, and I think show don't tell is great for rewatching movies because when you watch that movie again, you'll pick up a lot more of that stuff, and that's what makes great movies. And
Mhm.
it's almost like a quality that I think a lot of modern films are I would say a lot of big tentpole modern films are leaving behind, and it's really
They think
smart.
we're dumb.
Well,
They think we're a dumb audience and they have to spell everything out for us.
well, here's the problem. I think that not only do they think we're dumb, I think that what happens is there are a lot of dumb critics. And what happens is those critics will give it a bad review. So now, to shore up their investment, the studio's not going to let it be that way, right? They want to make it
Yeah,
spoon feed it and all that. So, but it was interesting. There's a lot there too, and I think that you know. So I said earlier, you and I have like a vampire, role playing game that we've done, and we just did a big season for that too. I think I don't typically watch vampire movies or anything like that while we do those games. I typically do it before or afterwards. I think when we come back to that game in the future, I'll definitely watch this movie before because it's just such a good movie in my opinion. Better than I was expecting. Went up,
yeah.
a few notches in my book. In fact, a lot of '80s movies I watch and they're not as good as I remember. This one was better than I remembered, but admittedly, I didn't. I hadn't seen it in a long time too. Let's talk about it compared to Lost Boys really quick. So,
Sure.
Lost Boys, I love Lost Boys, right? A film
Mhm.
that came out the same exact year has a very similar plot too.
Mhm.
In fact, all the way down to the guy that got infected with vampirism is okay in the end, right? Um,
Yeah.
Big difference though. Lost Boys is from this lens of the kids, right? So as we're kids, we come from the lens of the two Corys, right? So
Mm.
that's our way of peeking in at it, and still had a lot of good scary moments and things like that. I felt like this one was almost like just a really adult version of that type of story. So it's a picture in Lost Boys, the scene where he's out carousing with them and he wants to be one of them and they're hanging off the railroad tracks and things like that. This
Mhm.
is a movie where like half the movie's that, you know, half the movie's him with these crazy vampires. But what do you think of this compared to Lost Boys?
So I know you mentioned previously that you were thinking that this was better than Lost Boys as a whole.
Mm,
I still have to give the edge to Lost Boys, and I don't know if it's a budgetary reason or a directorial reason, but I feel like Lost Boys, and maybe it's just the number of times that I've seen Lost Boys, but Lost Boys is so iconic. The soundtrack, the music, the actors, you have the Corys in their prime, and there's just so many great lines in Lost Boys, and there's so many great setups and payoffs. Like with the grandpa, so many damn vampires, and just everything that just works beautifully with that film. Also, I have to say the climax in Lost Boys, where you get the sweet the sweet 80s montage, the music montage where they're all prepping for the attack from the vampires.
yeah,
Um, it, it's just so iconic, and then you get the battle, and you can only have that battle because they're both vampires, right? Michael, and then I forget the bad Keith Sutherland's vampire. They're both supercharged, right? So you get that sweet fight at the end. um, this one didn't have that because one of them became human in the last 20 minutes of the movie, through a blood transfusion, so he's a little bit outmatched, and he doesn't have a direct role in defeating the enemy. But I guess that's kind of the nature of the movie, right? They weren't really the enemy, at the end of Near Dark. They were kind of this surrogate family.
right.
So maybe that is a more appropriate ending. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I thought that I do give the edge to Near Dark after seeing it again. I think the main reason being I love Lost Boys. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a fantastic, and it's an artifact of the '80s. But I'm also a huge fan of westerns, and this
Mm.
is a western movie. It's not like an '80s bombastic, like
No.
two
Yeah.
guys, fighting in the air type of thing. But
Yeah.
I mean, but Lost Boys is '80s at its peak from the saxophone guy and the the
Oh man,
the neon
I still
pants
believe.
to that
Hmm.
Rob Lowe poster on the closet door. Like
Hmm.
it's just it's 80s to the core, right? And so it's so crazy how this movie is also 80s, right? But it's a
Hmm.
completely different look to it. The only thing that we really get that shows us the actual 80s is, other than the vehicle, the years for the vehicles, is the aliens marquee, right?
Oh yeah.
So
Hmm.
other than that, though, it's so hard to believe that these are the same year. So I feel like this is a more timeless movie, whereas Lost Boys is a kind of a product of its times. I do love Lost Boys. I do think that if I was going to watch a vampire movie with my kid, I'm going to watch Lost Boys with her, not this one, right?
Yeah.
Um, Lost
You got to
Boys, I
skip
think,
one scene, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, Lost, yes, but Lost Boys is a good time.
Hmm. It is.
This movie, I would say, it's less of a good time. It's just a different type of movie. It's Western, and that's why
Yeah.
I was really shocked by the ending. I guess now we can talk about the ratings, though. So I think that it would be a good scale to typically have, for ratings is, would you recommend it? Would you recommend it with caveats? Would you not recommend it? Or would you not recommend it, but with caveats? And I would say this one I have a hard recommend. I would definitely recommend it without caveats. I think it's a good movie, and I think it's not only a good movie. I think this is a good movie to show people that 80s movies can be timeless without feeling like they're a product of the 80s. Because I feel like a movie like Aliens, right? So Aliens is a timeless movie. Like if you
Yeah.
right, or actually even
It's in
Alien.
space.
Yeah, but here's the thing, even Alien is a timeless movie too.
Hmm.
If you told me that Alien came out in the mid '80s, I'd be like, okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
Other than like maybe the hairstyles and things like that, I can see that. Obviously, Aliens, it clearly came out in the '80s. But my point is that they did such a good job of conveying what they're putting out there that it didn't have to. It doesn't feel like it's shackled to a time. I feel like Near Dark doesn't feel shackled to a time.
Yeah.
In fact, in a lot of ways, I feel like it feels closer to the next movie we're going to talk about. John
Mm.
Carpenter's The Vampires in timeline, and there was a 11-year gap between them. But so I give it a hard recommend. What do you think?
Same, identical. Hard recommend. This one went completely under the radar for me, and not many films go under the radar for me, right? It kind of blows my mind that I didn't see this movie on TBS or any of the other cable channels that I had growing up. I didn't see the VHS. I don't really know how I missed this. So yes, hard recommend. Anyone gets a chance to see Near Dark, definitely do it. It's on Prime. You can go on there and rent it. Highly, highly recommend.
Sounds good. Yeah, it's on Prime as of late October 2020. Who knows? Who knows what's going to
Right,
be? A few months.
right.
But yeah, absolutely recommend it. And I'd love to see Catherine Bigelow come back to something like this too. Like
Oh,
a
that'd be
story like
great.
that.
She's
Um,
clearly talented. I wish she put out more films.
yeah. Well, I mean, maybe that's by design too. Like you and I
Yeah,
have talked about in the past with other directors. Sometimes they put out too much and kind of dilute their works.
yeah. Looking
But
at you, Ridley Scott.
yeah, hey, hey, hey. All right. So let's go on to the next one here. So let's talk about 1998's John Carpenter's Vampires, and let's have you start on this one.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So this was something that I saw when it came out. I remember seeing in the theaters, and I enjoyed it back then, and I hadn't watched it, right? So it had been like 20 years, and it kept coming up in my Prime feed, and I was like, oh, I want to revisit that. I want to revisit that. But I remembered not to revisit it with the kids in the room. So I finally got a chance to watch it, and I would say I would say most of it holds up. Um, I still really enjoyed it. I feel like Carpenter has such a specific style, and the adage with Carpenter is that he makes better movies when he has less of a budget. And so this one, they must have given him like a pretty middle of the road budget because I feel like he hit just the balance with it. James Woods, what can I say about him? We talked about the magnetic personalities with Paxton before, right? James Woods has that, but he's like the yang to Paxton's yin in terms of he's not a nice guy. He's not really likable in anything. And he typically plays such a great villain. It was a very interesting choice for him to be our lead in this. You definitely can't take your eyes off him, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're really rooting for him.
Right.
Uh, to talk about the opening, right? Because that's what really started us off with this. What I love about the opening is, and this is part of the Western trope with the movie, is that you have them show up in their sweet utility van in that awesome Jeep, and they all hop out and they all have their guns and they're all prepping. And then you have
Mhm.
a shot of James Woods in front of the door, and he's waiting to go in, and they're building the suspense with, what's inside, what's inside. And then they cut back to the door and they start zooming in the door and they cut back to James Woods. And it's such a very, like, it's almost like that 12 o'clock, that noon shootout in a Western,
Right.
except for one character is a human being and the other one's a door. But it's great. It's great. It builds to such suspense, and then they show up and they they break into the front door. One thing that bugged me about the door, and I don't know if you caught this or not, but they put this device up to the door, and they pump it,
Yeah,
right,
force the hole.
and right, but it's a wooden door. So, like, I see that happen sometimes with like glass windows. They'll put the thing up to the glass, and then they'll cut it out and then they can reach in. But it's a wooden door, so
See,
I'm just
I thought that was a real thing. I thought that maybe that they really did that. Like, you
well,
think that's a fake thing? I thought
absolutely.
maybe that's real. I don't know. Like, I
It's
bought that, man. I bought
oh my
that.
god, it's like an air pump.
Yeah, but
And
I assumed
if
there
they
was
were
like
sawing a
blades or
door.
teeth or something. I assumed like my here's my mentality when I watch a film, right? Is would they go out of their way to fake that effect if they could do it for real? And then if not, why wouldn't they just use a real effect on the door, you know? But I get what you're saying. I'm gonna have to look it up after we talk about this. But
Right.
I thought it was a real device. Anyway,
But yeah, no, so it's great. And I had mentioned this to you before after I first watched it, but I'll speak about it again because it's one of my small pet peeves with the movie. It's like uh he has this team and they are clearly professionals and they've been doing this for a while. They make a note of that, and they are all ready. They're ready to go in like a SWAT team, right? And you can tell like Woods is like directing them, right? Like, you over there, you over there. And they get in, and the second that they encounter a vampire, all hell breaks loose. And to me, it came across like they weren't fully prepared, or they were kind of amateurish, like a scene that you would see in a movie where the character who's never fought a vampire, has never done anything, gets thrust into this, and he just barely survives and barely makes it. And I got that feel because like everybody is getting tossed around, and the vampires could have killed him at any moment, and no one really gets staked except for that one vampire who gets staked in the head first, and he's still going because he's staked in the head, and then he gets staked in the chest. And but then they do the sweet gimmick. They do this, I will say, yes, the Jeep winch yanked out into the sun is a sweet gimmick. Does it, to me, did it get used a little bit too much for literally every single kill? Yes, I would say that. I would
but
have
that's
liked to
the
see a little bit
point.
more variety.
That's the point here. Hard, or first
Ah,
of all, hard to disagree. All right, I
oh
watched
god.
we were talking about this the other day, and I was driving for work, and I stopped to get a coffee, and I watched that scene on my phone. Now I was on my phone, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
and after watching that scene, I was like, I have to rewatch this movie after watching that scene. Because my boy Kirito Kagawa Shang Tsung was in it, and I know he only
Yeah.
has one line, but he's still in it. That still counts. But my
Poor
point
guy.
is, my point is, I when I watched that scene, I thought you were taking crazy pills, man. So when
Ugh.
I feel that the first of all, the tension leading up to them, going, I first the front door, great tension. I think the device
Mhm.
is real, but that's beside. Or they cut the hole in the door. They go in, right, and then he goes to do the door inside, and then the first one drops on them. I thought that there was a fearsomeness and a scariness to their vampires when they attacked, and what was happening was it immediately jumps on them, and they're calling, "Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot!" I
Mhm.
thought, to me, that screamed competence because they're not all starting to fire at like when their friends in the line of fire. So I thought, to me, they say, "Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot!" Or and then when he's off, they specifically say he's off, fire,
Yeah,
and then they start firing. The
I did
big
like
thing,
that.
the big thing to my wife made this comment. She says, "Well, the guns are pretty much useless against them. And I think that's the big point. The guns can't kill them. The guns
Mhm.
just slow them down a little bit to try to get the winch or to shoot them with the arrow or to stake them. That's the way they're using the guns in there. Because my wife, she was like, "Why are they firing so much on that the guns don't work?" Well, the reason why is because they're slowing them down. So I felt during that scene, yes, there was the one that dropped in the middle and it kept batting the rest of them away. But I thought that they did that specifically to show that the vampires were scary and strong. And I never took it to mean that didn't that they weren't good. In fact, like that they weren't competent as a vampire slaying, group. In fact, after they winched that first big one, and then Danny Baldwin gets his one liner with the priest and the skull. Like
Mhm.
after that, they go out and they clean out the rest of them. So then we have a montage. We don't actually see them fight them, but now we know they just took out a bunch more afterwards. So I think that they
Yeah.
just showed us those first two kills just to show us how scary they were, and then we see the montage. I think it was 9 total in the end. And so
Mhm.
for me, in my mind, it was like, oh, they just killed 9 of these suckers, right? These guys do know what they're doing. So it was interesting how we had the exact opposite reaction to that scene. Where mine, I was like, oh my goodness, they're actually really good at what they do, which I guess makes the next scene, with the
Yeah.
hotel even harder. So anyway, go on. So continue.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So fast forward to the hotel, which I will say I love this part, right? So I love where Valak, who's our head bad guy vampire, right?
Terry from
He
Karate Kid 3. Yeah, go on.
Oh, right. Yes, that is him. Oh my god. The guy who like basically started a vendetta because he lost a karate tournament or what.
Anyway,
Anyway,
anyway.
anyway, sorry. So he shows up and he just runs through the team, right? And I love that because you're right. It does show just how powerful and dangerous he is, and he caught them all unprepared. The one part of that that kind of bugs me, and I think it's maybe the direction or the editing choices, but at the end where Woods fights him in the hotel room, and he's literally there about to blow the brains out of the priest, and James Woods does this weird thing where he runs in the room. He doesn't get thrown or anything, but he like jumps and crashes in to like a dresser and hurts himself when he's trying to get his crossbow.
Stabs himself with the arrow on the crossbow or the bolt on the
Yeah,
crossbow. Yeah.
yeah, that was such a weird like again that kind of plays into the whole like ineptness thing that I think is unintentional. I know it didn't hit you with that, but that's what it hit me with, and I can't help but think that it's some kind of directorial decision or maybe
Yeah,
something got edited.
that was John Carpenter. That was I feel like Escape from New York is filled with stuff like that.
Y-
I feel like it's just his attempt to make it grittier and more realistic, like something that could happen in a scuffle. That's how I
Yeah.
took it anyway. But what do you think of that kill with the hand? And
Oh my
he
god.
cuts uh what the guy from Sons of Anarchy. He's also in
Yeah,
uh Dark
curly
Batman
hair dude.
Begins. He was in Batman Begins. He was the corrupt
Yes,
detective and all that. Yeah,
yes,
that guy. He's
love it.
great. Yeah, but
Best
anyway,
kill in the
I
movie.
love that kill. That kill was such a good kill. And I remember I even like made a noise and my wife was like, "You're so weird." Like when he did
It's
that
like an
kill.
anime. Before doing stuff like animes was cool, like he literally splits the guy in half with his hand. I
Yeah,
don't, you don't get any cooler than that. And the practical effects that they did for that is it's perfect.
yeah, I would say when I was a kid, we called that Japanimation. We called that
Japanime.
because that was a different, in my opinion, that's a different breed than what anime has become. And
Ah,
I'm much
ah.
more in line with that older stuff. But that party, though, I liked the party a lot. Right? I think
Mhm.
the weird misfire in that party for me was why did they have Katrina come on to James Woods' character at the party? Why didn't they start the relationship with her coming on to Danny Baldwin's character at the
You're
party?
right. Oh,
Like
that would have been so much better.
because there's no reason for her at all to come out of James Woods' character there, other than just to give him a one-liner, right? But
Yeah.
it just was weird to me, that they did that. I was thinking there has to be a reason, later on in the movie, and there wasn't a reason.
I
But
think it's just hottest girl here has to hit on hero, our
yeah,
hero, the main character, and I think that's why. And but that gets you're right, it gets completely abandoned, and then Danny Baldwin is the one that ends up falling for her,
right.
in the end, which I think is a good part of the story, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. Let's talk about Danny Baldwin. In my opinion, star of the show. In my opinion,
Yeah,
weird to say, but, star of the movie for me. I think that he made it.
Absolutely.
It was and I actually that I'm gonna admit my mistake here. I I for some reason thought that he was Backdraft Baldwin, which I believe I've now learned is William
Yes.
Baldwin because I'm a big fan of Backdraft because I'm a huge Kurt Russell fan. Um,
Yes.
but,
It's
apparently
okay.
it's not this Danny
Well,
Baldwin. And Flatliners, because William Baldwin, I believe, is also Flatliners Baldwin, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Correct. And it's okay because they're all merging into the same Baldwin. I don't know if you noticed this, but they're all puffing their faces out until they're all looking identical today. So,
Yeah.
cl
Well, Stephen
easy
Baldwin
mistake.
started the first on that, and,
Yeah.
because they got him to play Barney Rubble in that weird
Oh,
sequel to the
that's
Flintstones,
right.
but
That's right.
because his head was like that already, right? But I think Alec
Yeah.
Baldwin, I think I told you after The Shadow, his head increased about 200%.
It did.
And then ever since that was when Alex stopped being a heartthrob, or Alec rather.
Yeah.
But yeah, Danny I think killed it. I think that weird relationship with Katrina though, sometimes a
Mhm.
little bit too weird. I think that scene on the bed where he ties her up and she's like naked and all. I think that
Yeah.
I honestly think they did that just so that people can see the girl from Twin Peaks naked. Like
Right.
it was
Well, we only get the
weird.
back part. We only
Yeah,
get
but
her
it's just
back naked.
weird though. Like I don't know. Like I
It
felt
is.
like that was all a little weird, but I do think that their relation it got better throughout the movie. I
Yes.
almost got from him kind of a Dusk Till Dawn vibe of the Gecko brothers, or I should say more like Seth Gecko, where you like Seth even though he's a bad guy. I feel almost like
Mhm.
that's what they were going with Montoya, who's Danny Baldwin's character. They
I
wanted
agree.
he was a bad guy, but they wanted you to start liking him through the movie, and they never made any attempts for you to like James Woods' character. And
Not at all.
I think that they were. I honestly feel that role was made for a different actor, probably. Like
Mhm.
he probably knowing Carpenter, he probably wanted to get Kurt Russell, who he would have been awesome in it. But
Probably.
like I feel like that role was probably made for a different actor. And James Woods does have charisma, but he has villain charisma. Not
Yes.
he has Christoph Waltz charisma.
He
Like
does.
right?
Yes.
Where every once in a while you'll get like a Django Unchained where like he'll do it well as a good guy, but other than that, he's pretty much going to be the bad guy and stuff. Or at least be the jerk, in the story somehow.
You know who's, a lot like James Woods, in that respect? The bad guy who's been the bad guy in a ton of things, Bloodlines, Ready Player One, Rogue One, what is his name? Uh,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ben something, Ben
Mendelsohn,
Mettleton?
Mendelsohn. Yep.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
he's like
very
that too.
similar.
You're right,
Bad guy
absolutely right.
energy.
Bad guy energy or jerk energy, right? And
Jerk
they do it
energy.
so well. They do it so well.
Yeah.
But I do
Yes.
feel, speaking of James Woods, I do feel that James Woods had a great relationship with Montoya, or
Yes.
Jack Crow had a good relationship with Montoya. I think that they had a lot of chemistry between the two of them. But
It's a
you
shame they're separated. They shouldn't have been separated for so long. I mean, I know that we needed time for him to fall for Katrina, and to have that whole part of the story, which I get, but we needed more of James Woods and Danny Baldwin together in a room.
Yeah, I think that it's almost the priest character I like. He probably has the best character development in the film, in my opinion,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But I feel almost like they could have taken a lot of his stuff and given it to Montoya and not had the
Yes.
priest character as a separate character because honestly, it just didn't feel like they needed it. I did like his growth though. I thought that his growth was great. Um,
Mhm.
can we talk a little bit about the weird mythology that they built in this movie though? Like not since Dracula 2000 have I seen such like a like they have their own vampire creation myth. They have like a ritual. They have like a
Yeah.
the
That
Catholic
has to be
Catholic
done by
Church
a
has
priest.
sanctioned this, and it felt all very like Buffy the Vampire Slayer the movie to me. So at
It
points,
did. No,
well,
it definitely did. I actually like the Dracula 2000 mythos that they created with that because the whole
yeah, yeah,
Judas thing
yeah,
is cool, and it kinda plays in with the whole silver and the cross, and that jazz, and it's much older, right? This is like, "Oh, yeah, we botched a ritual, we botched an exorcism, what, 400, 600 years ago,
yeah.
and we accidentally created a vampire.
We
Whoopsie."
turned Terry from the Karate Kid 3 into a vampire, and he ended up becoming the first vampire.
Yeah.
And then they have it's weird too, because then they have like the vampires will sleep in the buildings, but then the master vampires will go underground and all. It felt very
Mhm.
messy, and Don't get me wrong, I generally liked it, but it did feel very messy. It felt like it was this because keep in mind this one was also supposed to be a western too. Like
Mhm,
at the point in his career when John Carpenter made this film, apparently this he came right out of Escape from L.A.,
mhm,
which bombed, right? And
mhm.
then he thought, I'm done. I'm not going to make any movies anymore. And I guess this was the movie that got him back in the saddle, for better or worse, because he hasn't really done anything great since then, but, unless I'm missing something, but, no, it felt like it was this movie was supposed to be like a Western too. In a lot of ways it was. But the funny thing with this is I wouldn't say this is like a Clint Eastwood Western. I'd feel like this is more of like a John Wayne Western, but with more violence and things
Abs
like that, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Where it's, kind of a Western in tone a little bit. We don't get a lot of the visual kind of Western styles that we got from Near Dark. Um,
Right.
but tonally, where you have your heroes swagger in, and take care of the bad guys. I feel like they achieved it there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I agree with you on the winch, by the way. So they use the winch the whole movie. I like it because I think that it shows that they are just completely unmatched against these vampires. The bad thing is that they're completely matched against these vampires, but then there are times in the movie they put them up against them one on one. And it's like, well, if you
Right.
need the winch, then you shouldn't rely on those scenes as much. But at the same times, it was like that. It was the '90s, right? I would
Yeah.
say between the two movies, and I know we're gonna compare the movies directly though. The winch effect when they're pulled into the sun, I like that almost like butane torch
Yeah,
look.
green.
I
There's like a
love
green
that, it
smoke to
looks
it.
like yeah, I love that
Mhm.
effect. I thought that effect was great, more opposed like the Bernie, and we'll talk about the two movies in a few minutes, like how they compare
Yeah.
to each other. But I thought that was really good because sunlight a lot more dangerous in this movie than the other one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other one, you have the characters kind of running through a field and they're getting a little smoky. This one, it's like, no, if you put me in direct sunlight, I will burst into flames instantly,
Right, right.
and maybe I'll drag you with me. Which, by the way, is my favorite wench action drag out in the sun kill is where that one dude grabs onto James Woods and he's dragging him out there.
I liked that one
Uh,
too.
yeah,
I
they
liked
should have done
that
more of
whole
that.
I liked that whole bait scene too with the priest, by the way, because
Hmm.
I know you were talking about how like James Woods' character is not really likable. I do think the one other than the Montoya scenes, right, where he's a
Hmm.
stand-up guy to I wouldn't say stand-up, but he's decent to Montoya. Um, I did like the scene where the guy agrees to go be the bait because he never learned how to drive the Jeep and and then James Woods gives him like kind of like a I don't know what it was like he just basically gives like an attaboy type of thing, right? And I
Yeah.
think that that was good. I think that that entire scene was really good. I wish there was a lot of in this movie like I don't want to say fade to black, but like the action happens off the screen for 10 seconds.
Right. Hmm.
And in that like we don't know what happened with him up there on top of the elevator, so it's kind of like all right, well how did you
Oh,
survive, right? It was very season finale of or last season of Game of Thronesy to me. But
oh yeah, yeah. He's up there. That's right. He's up there, and so is the other vampire.
right,
And
yeah,
and then it just kind of resolves.
right. But here's the thing though, I don't think the movie ever established that the normal rank and file vampires have the same level of strength. They're strong, but they don't have the same level of strength as the master vampires. I do
They
think
said
though,
they said they're all masters by the time that's remember because she's like connected to them,
yeah, but then
and
but then they said that there was like 30 of them afterwards. So I think that they said there was like 6 masters, but then there was like 30 vampires.
yeah, but it was clear that those people that were with him in the mine shaft or whatever it was were his masters, and
See,
then the other people in the town were just converted.
right, but I think that I thought that those were the other people in the town. I didn't think that they were
Ah,
masters. Those ones that
ah,
were doing that, right? Because I thought only the masters only came up out of the ground. I thought,
yeah.
but yeah, it's again, it's kind of confusing, right? So that's what. Again, we'll talk about these movies compared to minute, but this movie really decided to be ambitious with its mythology,
Hmm.
and in some ways, I think it suffers for it a little bit, from that.
A little
Um,
too close to the sun.
but
No
you
pun
you
intended.
you brought up a good point with Montoya and the wounds, his wounds. Talk about that.
Okay, so this is so 90s, right? Montoya gets wounded twice. He gets bit twice
Right?
by the same chick, and he's such a badass, right? He just can't walk around bleeding. So what does he got to do? He's got to cauterize the wounds. First time he does it with a lighter, which in camera, he's putting a lighter to his arm, which I thought was great. They
Well,
must have put
yeah,
some kind of
they put like
gel
latex
on there.
on there or something. Yeah,
Yeah, and he's holding it there, and he cauterizes the wound with a lighter, which I thought, okay, that's a cool scene. Like, it's so cliche, but I love it. And then to top it, he gets bit in the neck like really bad
right.
by his girl again, and he just kind of sits there and takes it. But whatever, she leaves. He comes to in the jeep. Oh no, I'm bleeding from my neck profusely. What do I do? I have this Uzi here. Let me shoot the Uzi up into the sky. And then he uses the heated up chamber of the Uzi to cauterize the wound in his neck,
Yeah,
like a total badass.
yeah. It was wasted on Danny Baldwin, I think. Like
Yeah,
that could have been used by somebody else in an action
right.
movie. John
Like
Carpenter's probably
Stallone,
he was probably sitting on that. John Carpenter was like, well, I guess I'll use it now. But
right.
yeah,
He's
no,
had that
that
idea since
yeah,
1976.
that was a yeah. He wanted to use it on Kurt, but there was just no good place for it. But
Right,
no, that was a good
Kurt
one.
doesn't get wounded.
I liked that scene a lot. I thought that was really good, and I liked the dynamic between Crow and Montoya, and towards the end of the movie, because remember, there's this kind of like a flip. It's a pretty fast flip, but like Montoya's like, "Hey, don't talk to her that way," right? And they start
Hmm.
fighting. But then when the priest is like, we need to like start working together," and then they just start working together, and they're fine. And I thought that was really good. Like I
Yeah.
thought it was good. I didn't think it was bad. I thought it
No.
was really. It showed their professional nature and things like that.
Yes.
Um, I did like this. So the movie, I remember this movie better than I remembered Near Dark because I watched this movie later. But I remember the iconic ending scene where, just like a western, he gives them the head start, and then he tells me he's gonna
Right.
go track him down. I thought that was great. It's just like the old west with the bounty hunter, you know. Because like somebody pulls a solid toward them, and then I'm going to give you a pass right now, similar
Yes.
to
I
actually
think of
I
Pirates.
what's that?
Pirates, the end of the first Pirates of the Caribbean, where
Yeah.
Jack Sparrow he gets the head start. Oh, I think we can give them a 2 days head start.
Right, right, yeah, and I think that's good. Like, I think that was a good scene. I like the ending of this movie much better than Near. I think we'll go over the ratings in a minute, but I liked the ending a lot. I thought that was good, and apparently it left enough room that they made a Bon Jovi sequel called Vampires Los Muertos. So
I watched the trailer for that.
okay, yeah, it
Yeah, that was all I
looks
needed.
it looks very B movie, very B
Yeah.
movie, but who knows? Maybe it's a horror gem. We don't know yet. Who knows?
Right. Right.
But let's talk about how this compares to the other big vampire film, the vampire film that dwarfs it, in terms of critical acclaim and viewership. Blade,
Hmm.
1998's Blade.
Mm.
I find it hard to believe that these movies came out in the same year.
Yeah. it's just it's to me, and this isn't fair, but they're not even comparable. Like, to me, Blade is so much more superior in almost every way, except for Blade never cauterizes one of his wounds with a recently fired Uzi.
It's
So
true.
I knock it down a peg for that.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, just action is better, the direction is better. And I love Carpenter, but I just feel like the direction of Blade is better. And I don't even remember who directed that. I know Guillermo did the second one, but I don't remember who did the first one.
yeah,
Um, the soundtrack in Blade, it's so iconic. I mean, this one I don't remember any of the songs from John Carpenter's Vampires, or any of the music. Cinematography, actors. I think Wesley Snipes is a better lead than James Woods. As much as I love James Woods,
yeah.
it's I don't know, it's
They
better all
both have some
around.
wonky one-liners, though. I think that
Oh my God, the ice skating uphill. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and also in James Woods, the whole, the stuff he was chiding the Padre. By the way, I
Oh
think the
my
Padre was in Blade. I was looking
no
at
way.
yeah, I was looking at the priest's movie, his IMDb profile, and he played a character in Blade called Curtis Webb, and I haven't seen Blade recently, so I don't know who Curtis Webb is.
Curtis Webb.
But
Is that
yeah,
one of the cops or something?
I think he was like a main character in Blade,
Oh.
but yeah,
Hmm.
apparently the priest was in two vampire movies that year, and one of them obviously was much more popular than the other. I think it's hard to believe because the Matrix changed the way the action movies worked, right? And that was just the next year, '99, right? Matrix
Mhm.
was '99, right?
It was. Yep.
Yeah. So it's hard to believe, right? I think that this is almost like a last. I keep it's a western too, right? And it's a
Yeah.
low budget western, so I shouldn't say it's trying to be like a true action movie, but it has a John Carpenter charm to it. I think Blade is the better movie. So while for Near Dark and Lost Boys, I think Near Dark takes the case for Lost Boys. This I definitely think Blade's a better movie than Vampires. And I don't even know who directed Blade. That's how sad that is. But I did like Vampires though. I wished we would. I would have. I almost feel like this is they didn't do prequel movies back then, but I would have loved to see a movie about his whole team. And before they had
Yes.
the thing, I feel like the more interesting story there was the team and how they were doing all that and their relationships with each other.
Yeah, they're
Um,
all so iconic too. You think about the actors that were a part of that team. It's like,
yeah,
why did you hire these guys? Why did you hire Shane Sung and then not use him?
yeah.
Like you just have him in the very beginning.
And I said Kerry Tokugawa. I'm sorry, it's Kerry Tagawa, not
Ah,
Tokugawa. So that was my mistake. But yeah, or I think Mark Boone Jr. and Akima, he probably wasn't big back then. The guy, your guy from Batman Begins, and of course he was in Sons of Anarchy and a bunch of other stuff. But um, I think there was definitely a lot there that they could have done. I think that they were almost doing like a Magnificent Seven fake out, at the beginning, and then
yeah.
they faked it out, right? So and they went from there. But I do think that Woods, he definitely did succeed in making a vampire western for it.
Mhm.
I did feel like it was entertaining. Will I rewatch it anytime soon? Probably not.
Right.
Is it one of his strongest movies? Heck no,
No. I
not at
the
all.
magic was fading. The Carpenter magic was fading in the 90s
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, apparently this is his only film that he released in the 90s that actually made money, and it didn't even make money domestically. It made money internationally. So I think
Oh,
like on
no.
a really bad but really low budget, I think it made its money back and then a little bit, but it was only because of the international market. But
Oh gosh,
but
that's a
hey,
shame.
yeah. Well, it is what it is, right? I think
Yeah.
it's still I'm glad I watched it. And then it led to me watching Near Dark. So what would you say your rating is for John Carpenter's Vampires?
Uh, I rate it recommend with caveats, and the caveat is warning, heavily 90s.
Yeah, I would actually say the same exact thing. Recommend it with caveats. I think that there's some people where I would recommend this to, and if they watched it with no, um, they just went in blind to it. I think that they would probably, not be super happy with me afterwards.
No.
It's definitely, yeah, big caveats. Super 90s. I wouldn't even say like the best parts of the 90s. I would say it's just you have to be prepared. We both like horror movies, so we're used to a lot of low rent stuff and horror, right?
Right.
So we forgive a lot. I think that there's some stuff in this movie that would be less forgivable to the average moviegoer. I can tell you, my wife was not a huge fan. She
Yeah.
it was like a waste of time. So, unfortunately, it was like I didn't think it was a waste of time. I still enjoyed myself, but I don't think everybody would enjoy themselves.
Exactly.
So,
That's
so
exactly it.
let's talk about the two movies compared because these are both two different approaches to a vampire western. I'll let you go first on this. So, Near Dark versus Vampires. Not just necessarily which one's better. Which one do you think fulfilled its goal? I would say which one approached it in a better way, the vampire western.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you say that, Carpenter went after this because he wanted to do a Western because I feel like Near Dark did a much better job of capturing that. Both cinematically and tonally. Near Dark it just crushes it on all fronts. It looks better. I feel like it's better directed. I feel like the pacing is better. The characters, we talk about not really liking James Woods. Do we even really care about him? Like, would you be sad if he died? Maybe not. But some of these characters in Near Dark that are basically villains. I mean, they're murdering people in bars and on the side of the road. We actually kind of care about some of them,
Yeah.
and we like them. So I feel like it succeeds on all fronts and surpasses, specifically in the vampire western arena.
Right. It's weird for me because I would say only because of my experience with westerns. I would say whenever I watch a western, there's probably a greater than 50% chance it's going to be crap. And that's unfortunately just unless you're watching like a best of list, right?
Sure.
So I would say John Carpenter's vampires does feel like more of a western to me. Um,
Okay.
Only because my
Because of
general
its flaws?
experience with, yeah, like I would say because of the set pieces, right? It has a lot of that New Mexico, Spanish town architecture and things like that.
That's true.
Um, so I would say the way it's set up for that, I do feel like it fulfills its role as a rank and file western, right?
Okay.
Where I would say that Near Dark fulfills a role as one of those more darling westerns, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Just those
like
westerns that,
Outsiders.
yeah, or
It's like Outsiders with vampires.
yeah, yeah, or uh, out Josie Wales, things like that.
Oh,
Like I
yes.
think
Okay.
it's like there's certain westerns that I just think are just samurai movies are the same thing for me too. Like I love samurai movies, but I watch a lot of crappy samurai movies, and that's a weird thing. I think in that strange regard, westerns and samurai movies and horror have the same type of thing where you put up with a lot of crap, and you even learn how to enjoy the crap because it's just more of the thing that you like, and you can pick little pieces that you like of it. So I would say, does it? Near, John Carpenter's Vampires feels more like a western to me, but Near Dark is a better film to me, and it's still a really good western, right?
Hmm.
Whereas nowadays, modern westerns are like Logan and stuff like that, right? Like modern
Right.
westerns are like Academy bait, Academy Award
Yeah.
bait, in my
310 to
opinion.
Yuma.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, no, 310 to Yuma was a remake though. That was a good movie. Like
Yeah,
it's
no, it's
310 to Yuma,
great.
True Grit, like those remakes and all that. I think those are very. I think that those remakes are pretty good. I think that they stay very true to the source material while innovating a little bit.
Right.
Um,
But we don't get
then
low rent westerns. I feel like if somebody's doing a western nowadays, it's gonna be high quality, or at least they're
oh, see,
shooting for high quality.
See, like I watch a lot of. I still watch crappy westerns. I watched a Scott Eastwood crappy one a
Oh,
few
no.
weeks back. Yeah, like trust me, man, there are some crappy westerns. I made you watch that Michael Fassbender one um, a couple years ago, and then I watched the Mads Mikkelsen one too a couple years ago,
Oh, yeah.
where Jeffrey Dean Morgan was the bad guy. Like there's a lot. And don't get me wrong, that wasn't a bad movie. There was parts I liked about it. It wasn't a great movie though. That's my point. My point is John Carpenter's Vampires, I would say I would still recommend it. It's above the 50% mark. It's above the that did I enjoy myself? Yes, mark, right? But
Sure.
it got the job done. It was a western. It got the job done. Or it was a vampire movie. It got the job done. It wasn't like a it wasn't an amazing film by any means. And I would say the majority of westerns, sadly, and the majority of vampire films, sadly, and I would say even horror too nowadays, I watch so much of it, a lot of it just falls in that category. So because of that, that's why this movie felt more like the Western to me than Near
Hmm,
Dark did.
hmm,
But Near Dark,
okay.
better movie by far. Like, and it's so weird too because it's John Carpenter, and I love John Carpenter,
Yeah.
right? But it's weird because one of my favorite movies is Big Trouble in Little China, and
Mhm.
I absolutely love that film, and it doesn't feel anything at all like The Thing to me, right? Which is
No.
another movie I absolutely love, right?
Yep.
Um, and I think that what happens is John Carpenter, I feel like a lot of times his movies are really dependent on the material that he's the script or
Mhm.
just the bones of the script and those story elements and things like that. And then this was a case where apparently it was actually written way before he got a hold of it, and I guess it was going to be Dolph Lundgren and Willem Dafoe as Jack Crow
Whoa.
and Valak, So
Whoa.
it made the rounds before John Carpenter ever got to it, right? And apparently he did like a rewrites on it, and um, and then it obviously changed a lot when he did his rewrites. But the source material for this, I don't think it was um, good
That's
enough
strong.
for his pedigree. But maybe perhaps for where his career was in that moment, it was the right pedigree because he wasn't exactly firing on all cylinders in the '90s, sadly.
It's true.
But at any rate, I thought it was really fun to visit two of these lesser known vampire movies of their times and seeing how they compare to these other movies. And from it, I have now added a new vampire movie into my rotation again. And I thank you for that because you were the one that started that by clicking on something on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you for Near Dark. I had not seen that until now. So, huge, huge win. I think that's gonna be like a yearly visit, maybe a bi-yearly visit for me. Loved it.
Absolutely. And there's if there's some other movies too that we are into like the vampire stuff for our tabletop role playing game. There are some other stuff too I'll recommend to you on that, but maybe
Oh,
we could do a
perfect.
different video on that in the future. So,
Yeah,
anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and
yeah.
take care. We'll catch you next time.